So hi, it's Rob from ActionCOACH Reading Wokingham, here with Javan. Do you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Javan Bramhall. I'm the Managing Director of Digital Glue. We're a marketing and web agency based in Birmingham, and we help customers achieve ROI in their marketing efforts.
Fantastic. I love that bit about the ROI, where so many marketing companies go wrong and say, you can't measure the ROI. And I always say, well, if you can't, then you're probably not doing it right.
I've had that message hammered into me by some business coach I know.
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember
Who
his
would
name.
that be? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long have we worked together now on the coaching?
Um, at Digital Glue, I think we've been working together about 6 years now, Rob.
That long?
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
I'm sure it feels longer.
only a bit. Yeah, so really from very early on when the business got serious, I would say, in terms of when we sort of started to expand and think about growth in the business. Yeah.
It was about day 2, wasn't it?
Well, a few personal issues in the first year that we needed to get through, but yeah, it wasn't far off.
Yeah, good. Okay. So listen, the whole reason that I wanted to talk to you at this point is about company values, which, as we know, are a reflection of your own values. And the thing that prompted it was seeing a post out on LinkedIn, and immediately I saw that, I thought, yep, that is what I need to get Javan to tell people about, because I find a lot of businesses just simply don't have the company values, or they don't have them stated, or they're invisible, they're not on the website, or worse, like in businesses I've worked in the past, they're on the wall just for everyone to laugh at and say, yeah, right, as if. So the cynical view of them is the terrible one, but you've actually managed to do it really well. So I could say, what prompted you to come up with the values in the first place, but it's probably because your business coach said, you need to get your values straight.
Well, do you know what? It's worth just on that a couple of minutes, because it was to an extent, but actually the lesson you talked about of it being a list of things on the wall that everyone laughed at is kind of what inspired me in the first place. And I won't, badmouth anyone from previous, but in another previous company I worked in, there was a bullet point list in frames around the office of the company values.
Yeah.
All of which everybody completely ignored and paid zero attention to. Now, those values were the values of the ownership of the business. They were genuine things that the owners of the business believed in, and all of them had, merit. But nobody cared, and nobody really paid attention to them. And beyond putting them in a frame, there was no reference for use of those values in any way. They were just there, and it kind of. So coming out of that experience, and relatively quickly after that, not straight away starting a business, it struck me as just like, this feels like something that should be part of an organization. And as an organization grows, and I always wanted to grow the business, how do you get the values of the ownership to be fundamental to the business, even when the owners aren't running the business? And that's always been the goal, of course, to be running a business, not having a job, and all those kind of things that we talk about.
Yeah.
And I think but you're never going to feel comfortable as a business owner stepping away and out of a business if you don't feel that the people in it are going to run it in a way that you'd be proud of. And therefore, if you don't have the values in place, how can you ever do that? Is sort of something I've always felt. So yeah,
I think we've seen elements of that as well reflected in through sort of lockdown, where managers are worried about how will their employees behave when they're at home? Like, will they actually do any work? and it really illustrated that whole thing, where I get business owners telling me about managing their team, and they want them in sight and everything like that. And I just look at it and go, seriously, do you think that because you can see them, what's on their screen, and they're working and they're doing the right work? If they're not adhering the values, if they're not bought into it, they're probably not working, whether they're in the office or not.
Well, absolutely. And on the flip side as well, as a employee working for those companies, what about those companies who are exploiting the furlough scheme, making people work anyway, and all the rest of it? Where are their values, and how do people who are working for those companies feel about it now? So
they're the ones that have the company values on the wall saying honesty, integrity, etc.
Well, I mean, and that's the big lesson, isn't it? It's our friends at Enron who had, I think, was it integrity, honesty, and something else as their 3 key statements of value, and that went well, right? So I think, there are millions of salient lessons in bad value delivery. So I think if you're looking for inspiration of what not to do, that isn't going to be that difficult, frankly. You could look around, you know, and my lead on from that would be to say that we looked at ours, and when we were starting the conversation, we started ours by looking at the Netflix Point of Culture presentation. Very famous deck that's probably still available on SlideShare and all the rest of it. And I haven't looked at it in a while, actually. But that was a really fantastic reference of a way that a very progressive, modern, forward-thinking company thought about values. Now, I can't tell you whether working at Netflix is a reflection of that or not, but you get the sense of the success of that organization over the last few years, that probably they're doing a few things right. So, you know, that strikes me as so that was where we kind of, I wouldn't say we started there, but we definitely looked at what are the companies, loads of places doing it badly. Okay, learn from that. That's important. What are the companies that we think we look up to and aspire to from a values perspective, and who we might look to emulate?
Okay. So if you were advising someone else who doesn't have their values clear, or don't have them at all, or they're not visible, or their employees are not following them, because I think that accounts for a lot of businesses I meet, that the values are this, you know, fluffy thing that make no difference, and what's the point because no one believes in them. Whereas I think you really have built your business based on the values, and that people live them. So for people watching this, I don't want them to just sort of say, you know, well, you've done that, isn't that nice? I'd like them to understand, how do they go about it? And even what are the advantages and how does it work? So my first question then is, what would you say is the advice as to why a business is going to benefit, or how does a business benefit by having their values really clear?
Okay. So I think, but I mean, first thing to say, I think it does change based upon stage of the business. So that is something, your advantages and benefits that you get will shift depending on where you are. But so if I take a few of as through the journey of the last 6-7 years of running Digital Glue, and perhaps that's helpful. First of all, I think recruitment is critical, and there's two ways that helps directly. Number one is the amount of people who apply for jobs with Digital Glue who talk to us about our values without us prompting them is significant. They're people who are value-based individuals. So whether you agree with my values or not, frankly, is up to you. But are you going to buy into that company, and do you want to be involved in it or not? And those people who have done and have looked at our values and talk about them in interview, they are people who stick, frankly. So you can see it from a mile off. So people
are you saying that having your values on the website is what attracts those people?
It's a big part of it. It you know, well, obviously I don't know the ones who haven't applied because they thought, what a load of fluffy old nonsense, I won't talk to those guys. But I suppose that's the point. If I believe in them, I don't want those people applying, and that's
They've
great.
They've deselected themselves already.
Correct, which is exactly what you're looking for. And in any marketing, we want people to, you know, select or deselect. And then the second point is around during interview. You know, we know what we call them, a digital gluer. I don't quite know how this has caught on, but anyway,
people who are going to stick.
But yeah, we know what one of those looks like. We've learned that over the time. But even before we've learned that, which is more a recent, you know, finding, I suppose we were able to shape questions in interview around values. So we put sections of our face-to-face interview questions, and we don't ask them all, their guidance for us, but we've got sections of our face-to-face interview questions which are about values. So if I think about something specific, I think about challenging ourselves and our clients, for example, as one of our fundamental values. You know, as a marketing agency, our job is not to be a bunch of lemmings doing stuff that people tell us to do. It's about consulting, providing advice, and being a great advisor to somebody. So we've got to make sure that if a client comes to us with something that's poor advice, badly put together, or a bad idea, we've got to have the strength to tell them that, and to be able to communicate that in an articulate way, and also to accept when they disagree with us and do it anyway. But that's a different conversation. So that, but where that then helps is during interview process, that's something we can really talk to. We can ask them scenario-based questions about how they might address something. We can ask them about, we can look at the way that they approach us about asking us questions about the organization. There's 2 or 3 areas where we literally write in the question underneath, looking for XXX. And it's about this value, that value. And a lot of the times it's values that are central in that recruitment process. And that's from telephone interviews to second interviews for whatever it's going to be. And it's throughout the process. So that's really crucial. So we get the right people through that. So that's, number one advantage of values, I would say. Number 2 is, do you know what? I think it genuinely has a bottom line impact without any question on bottom line. And so if I just explain what I mean by that, again, I'm trying to think of a good example here. So again, let's talk about listening first as a great one of our, it's probably I think it was the first one I wrote down. I'm a bit of a Stephen Covey advocate, so seek first to understand and then to be understood. So a bit of business book geekery, so that's great. But if we think about that listening first, is that as a marketing agency, one of the biggest dangers is someone walks on and says, I need social media advice. And you go, great, we'll help you with social media. And we sell them social media. And the opportunity for social media was a few £100 or £1,000 or whatever it was. Yeah. Whereas if you say, okay, tell me a bit more. And we ask listening questions and we ask open questions where people can talk to us and explain the challenges that they got. It means that we sell them the right solution. And because we're an integrated agency and we can sell multiple different solutions, that often means that someone who thinks they're talking to us about social media is actually talking to us about web branding, communication, messaging, a whole range of things. And we're able to actually talk to them about how we can help them best. And actually that in turn adds to our profitability as an organization. Yeah. It also sometimes means that we don't sell them anything, which is also really important because your trust and credibility goes up because you say, well, this isn't the right solution for you, in my opinion. And that's also okay. And then, so those are 2 sort of real, for me, tangible examples of the kind of situation where having values can have a really direct impact on the business. Does that answer the question, Rob?
Yeah, it does. So probably good to actually give a few examples of your values and either just tell us what they are and skip on to the next, or if there's anything you think is worth saying about the particular values, like why did you choose it, what impact does it have? Just talk us through some of the values, because you've got 11 company values, and
we do.
Yeah. And that's did you have 11 right from the beginning?
Well, it's a good question. Did we have 11? Yeah, we've always.
I normally say if you can get about 7.
Yeah,
because you always feel like there's more things you can put in, but the more you have, the harder it is for people to remember them.
And you know what? I think if I was reflecting back, I'd probably try and have less. But I also look at them now, and I don't feel there's something I want to take away. So
it's the same in ActionCOACH. We have 14 values or 14 points of culture, and I think before I joined 10 years ago, as I understand it, it just became this sort of creeping feature monster where every year at a conference someone say, we need to add in this extra value, and everyone go, yeah, absolutely, we need that value. So that then whenever Brad was looking at it, he'd say, okay, you can review the values if you like, but there is a rule. If you want to add one in, you got to choose which one you take out. Well, of course, you look through the values and no one's going to go, oh yeah, let's take out honesty. We don't want that anymore.
Yeah, nobody wants that. And I think, I guess there are a couple of things I would say about the number of values, and maybe this is a bit of a practical thing as a slight divergence, but
I think this is exactly the kind of thing that other business owners grapple with, that they can end up, often what they'll do is they'll go Googling other people's values because they don't know what their own values are. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'll have that one, and 5 of those, and 2, and they end up with this huge list. And then what they've done is just pick things that sound good as opposed to actually being real and mattering.
Yeah. Well, so I think personally I would, on reflection, try and pick less. I also think there's a really interesting thing to think about values and culture effectively. So there are points of, and I do think there's a difference, and I do think there is an adjustment, and this is a bit of a nuance, but I do think that actually there might be 2 or 3 cultural behaviours that you set out which are slightly different, which might be a bit more internal. They might be a bit of the way you behave and you interact with each other within the organisation and the standards you set for themselves. That's what culture is.
That's kind of like the rules of the game.
Exactly, and that's so I think you can separate that a little bit. So that's probably one good thing to think about. If you were to have values on one side, rules of the game on the other, and you were thinking of something and went, actually, that could go over there. I don't need that in my values statement overall. That could be helpful, effectively. How you roll that out is another question, or both of them. But anyway, so I think having less than 11 probably is good advice generally. As much as
you've got 11. Okay.
I have 11. We have 11, excuse me. And as much as anything, because we paint them all on the wall as well. So, if you've got there's less painting involved, and we're orange.
So paint. There's a new value. Yeah.
Expensive paint bill. No.
So you have them on the wall. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So we have 11 values. We have them painted on the walls. So when we first moved into our first office, that wasn't a garden shed a very posh garden shed.
So your first real office, but your second office.
Yeah. We had an art student from the University of Birmingham come in, and she wanted to do it for free, but we insisted on paying her. And she painted the scenes. We had the scenes created by a graphic designer. The painter painted the scenes on the wall, stenciling and all the rest of it. But she also came up with her own ideas, and she built this pathway and a journey between that linked the things. We've got the idea of being creative, for example, as one of our values. And we had these power cables that were running trunking above the things. And so she painted the power cable and then linked that to the light bulb above the head of the image. So it's a nice, fun little thing. So, but actually having them on the walls in that way, and it was a small office, and we had 11 blinking values on the wall, right? So having them on the wall like that, we were genuinely, as we were building the team from 1, 2, 3, 5 people, we were discussing decisions we were making about quoting or conversations with clients, or whether we wanted to deal with this kind of person or this client. And we were pointing to values on the wall while we were having questions, while we were having conversations, and they were genuinely informing our decisions about how we behaved. And that was really important, in that growth phase of the business, when your behaviors are norming, when you're setting the standards of behavior. And, as business owners, often it's our first time, hello, welcome to, I'm Javan, I've just started to run my own first business. And we don't know how to do that. We don't understand how that norming of behaviors works.
Yes.
So having the values there was a massive help, because it just meant that we constantly referred to them and we used them all the time. They were our conscience, if you like, as a business. Don't just chase the money. Don't just do something because someone else tells you to do it. Do these things that really set you up as a business in terms of the way you behave. So we do that. So if we go back to that kind of setting and how you choose them, the way we went through it was I wrote down a bunch of values statements that I thought would be important, and they were important to me and valuable to me, and they meant something to me. And then we had a small team at the time, and I asked them independently to come up with their own sort of set of value statements. And I gave them the Netflix deck, and I gave them a couple other sources of information to sort of, these are some ideas, some inspiration you might want to go and look at, but really they want to be coming from where you are.
Yeah.
And what was very interesting was that when we got those back in and I reviewed them against my own written down values, which I hadn't shared previously, there was a significant amount of match up, or things were written differently, but they were very much the same emphasis. So we explored those together and made sure they worked. And there was 3 or 4 that we just said, hear what you're saying, but I don't feel strongly enough to make. There was one of the things we said in terms of choosing ones, and we had, say, 15. Thank God we didn't do all of that. So, was, would I be willing to not do business with somebody on the basis of that value?
Right.
So that was almost our checkpoint to say, and where we were a bit flaky, it was like, well, that's probably enough. It probably isn't the right thing to be saying. So, all of the things that we've got down are fundamental things which we would choose the value over the cash that someone might pay us for a piece of business, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And the phrase I use in getting people to decide whether their values are real is after saying it and kind of honing it over many years, now I'll say, like, you can tell if this is a value that truly matters to you, because would you actually stick to that value even if it cost you money or caused you personal embarrassment?
Yeah.
And it's fair to say that with a few of them, people will insist on it and go, no, I'd stick with it anyway, even if it cost me money or caused me personal embarrassment. I go, okay, that one about honesty, do you ever speed? Do you want to call the police now and admit it? Okay, so even there, when you would stick to the value even if it cost you money or caused embarrassment. Yeah, there's still limits even there, but it's about being reasonable, not about being crazy about it.
Yeah, and open and honest communication is one of our values, for example, to lean into that point. And what do we, that I can think of as you were talking, and I was thinking of the amount of times that I've had to say something to somebody to live that value, which has basically hurt, in one way or another.
Because, them or you.
Well, yeah, correct. And that's absolutely true. So if unfortunately I've had to, a member of staff, hasn't been at the right level when they've had to, and I've had to tell them that, that's a difficult conversation on both sides, right? If I've had to tell a client that we've made a mistake or there's been an issue, then that's a difficult conversation, and on and on and on. But the respect that you gain from people, if you take that value of open and honest communication, the respect you gain and the trust you build when you communicate openly and honestly always outweighs that short-term pain, effectively. I can't think of a situation where I haven't thought, oh, do you know what? I was open and honest about that, and that's really cost me.
Yeah.
Or long term.
Correct,
short term,
bigger picture.
And there can be other things, but that was the wrong thing to do. It was always the right thing to do. It might have cost me a little bit, might have been a bit painful, always the right thing to do. So, yeah, it's a good example of a value I do stand by, and for the good or the short term bad sometimes, but that's the right thing to be doing.
Yeah. So, when I look through your values, and I sometimes talk and sometimes use yours as examples to other people, there's always one that I tend to pick on in describing it to other people, because I like to see how they react to it, because it is unusual. So you've got 11 values, and which one is it? Number 10 out of those. So probably a bit later.
I know where you're going with it. Yep.
So number 10, you'll obviously know off by heart which that
mistakes.
Is. Yeah. So you have a value which is you want your team to make mistakes. So tell me about that.
Absolutely. Do you know what? One of the most important values we have. If you have an environment, a business environment, and I've worked in them, where every mistake that anyone makes, from an apostrophe missing to a missed buy on a product range or whatever, is shouted down, shot at, abused, openly vilified, or whatever range of emotion. And we've all been in those kind of managerial environments that are pretty toxic. Yeah. If you've got that environment, what risks will people take? None.
Yeah.
Do you want an organization that takes no risks, that doesn't have team members that look for opportunities? If you do, hammer the mistakes. If you want one where people come to work and go, I'm going to give it a go, I'm going to try something, I'm going to test myself, I'm going to push myself, if you're not pushing yourself, you won't make mistakes, right? That's great. But if you've got the bravery and the courage to actually try something new, test something out, then you know what? You're going to make some mistakes. And when you do, great, fine. Let's not make a big mistake. Let's fail small. Let's control those things. So we're aware when we're taking a risk, so that we can manage it and fail small. Being open, being transparent. I'm going to this is something I haven't tried before. I'm going to give it a go. Okay, fantastic. Let's try that. Yeah. Right. Rather than spend 50 grand on a marketing budget on that, shall we just do it on a small event to see what happens first, and then we can judge or whatever. Yeah. So for me, that's a fundamental of the environment we want to create in the organization. We want that capability. Now, as a marketing agency, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because don't make mistakes with other people's money, right? So if you're doing that for clients, or you're trying to run that for clients, you've got to be really clear with clients about how you're going to fail small and how you're going to manage that process as well. And then you come back to, and the other thing is, there's an interlink between these values. So then you come back to open and honest communication. So then you're saying to a client, look, we're going to try this new piece of technology, or we're going to, for a website build, or we're going to take a different approach here to see if this works. This might not work, but I think on the balance of probabilities, it's worth a go based on these things. And a lot of the time I go, yeah, you know what? That's worth the risk. That's a challenge worth taking. And so, yeah, it is an interesting one. Again, it comes, maybe there's a theme here. It does come from previous experience of environments where that wasn't okay or didn't get dealt with. And I kind of pushed back on that and said, is that the environment I want to create in the organization? And it wasn't. And that's why I deliberately set out a value which responded to that.
Yeah, I think through the years as an employee, what we tend to learn from managers and others around us is we learn either of two lessons, where you say, I never want to be like that, or wow, that's brilliant, I want to be like that. And both lessons are very valuable.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting, the managers who I'm referring to in these kind of conversations in my head, obviously, they're also, I could probably list 20 things that were fantastic and I learned amazingly good things from. So it's just that they're easier to pick up on some of these kind of perhaps less positive experiences.
You've reminded me as well, talking of not so positive things, that back in the 90s, I met the first person who was effectively a business coach. That's what he did. And I asked him to do some training, because that's what I thought of it as at the time, with my team. And he was quite reluctant. And the first exercise he got them doing was learning to make mistakes proactively, and described to me afterwards that he needed to do this because I'd created a culture, an atmosphere where every mistake got jumped on. I was very good at spotting everything that was wrong and telling everyone. And so I can say, as someone who's lived and done that, the intention behind it is a positive one. Like, you get good at spotting what's wrong, and you also get good at spotting what's going to go wrong. The mistake is that in a misguided belief that telling people what they're doing wrong is going to help them do it right, it just creates the wrong culture. So maybe that's why this particular one appeals to me, where I'm going, I wish someone had told me that years ago. But they didn't.
I think the other thing I would really say to anybody on values is, they're there as a guide. They're there as your tool to help you. You will sometimes fail on them. You will sometimes not deliver to them. And there'll be standards that you may or may not always achieve on. And you know what? That's okay. Accept that, understand it, want to be better, that's fine. But, if I look at those values, sometimes I go, you know what? We haven't quite delivered on that. We need to make sure we are focused on that, and some of these values that we've picked are 11. Some of them, I suppose, almost to many organizations or people would be self-evident. They are what they are. Putting client results first and always delivering what we say. It doesn't sound exactly controversial, does it, to be honest with you?
Yeah, but how many companies actually do it?
How does that, what are the behaviors that we're actually talking about? And we've got behind the values, once we'd written the values, one of the next steps we did was we wrote down what the behaviors were behind the values, because I think that's also critical, because you get a new member of staff join you and they like the idea of, listening first. Well, how the hell do I do it? And do I need training? And do I need, what does that actually look like? Putting client results first, for example, if I'm sitting there going, I've got this new opportunity for a tender that I've been asked to do, or I've got this client project that needs focus on, the client project has to come first.
Yeah.
And in a small organization, when you don't have someone to write tenders for you while you're delivering and all the rest of it, when you're juggling all those things as a business owner, hello, welcome to, running a small business, those are decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you could say, well, I'll do both and I won't see my family for a week. But again, another choice you might want to make. So these are the kind of things. So it's those behaviors and what they actually mean behind it that's critical. And if you think, I suppose, if you go back to our failed values at the beginning, what will it have been? The reason they have failed will have been because people didn't know what they meant, or it wasn't laid out.
Interpretation,
how they exactly. So it was either interpretation, or they just didn't know what they meant, or they weren't managed to. But that's another.
So this is probably a key point to pull out for people then. So not only did you create the list of values, but then you've created guidance and training. So what examples, the behaviors you said of example
Yeah.
behaviors?
Exactly. So literally, we've got a document that we talk that is part of the induction pack that we run through initial and training on and talk about, which is, right, what does this mean? What are the kind of behaviours, example behaviours that we, in this scenario, this would be the way we'd behave using this value, for example. This is how we live that as an organisation. So, enjoying each other's company. Okay, yeah, we should all go, other companies would advocate it's important to spend time together, right? And it's important to get on as a team. Well, I've always believed, probably because always believed, I've been coached to believe, probably anyway, that what gets measured gets done, what you plan in gets achieved. So, we want to spend time together. We finish at 4:30. We finish at 5:30 on a Friday, as every other company in the country does. We happen to spend the last hour of that in the pub.
Yeah.
4:30 till 5:30. It's still working hours, but we spend it together. You don't have to drink alcohol. We've got people who are teetotal, Muslim, different religions, etc. Backgrounds. It's not about drinking. It's about spending time together.
Yeah.
And that's critical. And also just spending time together, not talking about particularly. And I quite generally encourage to chat about the weekend and other stuff and all those things. If we want to talk about a project, they can, but that's not what it's there for. And it's the same with, we have a bi-weekly team lunch where we buy the team some lunch. We saved ourselves all sorts of money during COVID on this. But that's not the intention. But the point about that, again, that's having lunch together. That's nothing to do with, we don't talk about work. We don't have a learning session built into it. It's not some opportunity for me to talk about some issue or initiative.
I need to fix this. Yeah, we need
it's just like, let's just have a chat. Let's just have a conversation. You want to have a learning thing, put it at a different time. That's absolutely fine. We have summer parties, Christmas holidays, Friday fun days. All of those stuff were built around me just wanting to enjoy myself a lot when I run a business, number one. Number two, because actually a team that hangs out together is close and works well together. They just do.
Yeah.
And so that's the sort of, I suppose, it's important that the company, when it's creating a point of value, lives it.
Yeah. Because
then it can expect and demand or want the team members involved to live them as well. Yeah. Good. Your favourite word, congruence, Mr. Pickering.
Well, I don't know if it's my favourite, but it's up there. So inevitably, people listening to this are probably going to think, so what are all of the values? So they can no doubt find them on your website. Do you want to just say where they could go and look and see the values and
Digital Glue, www.digitalglue.agency, and they go on the About page in the top navigation, and in the About page you can watch a video about our values where we talk about them. We've got team members talking about the values and what they mean to them personally, including yours truly. And then we've got a selection of images of all the values with our icons, and those are the exact same icons that are painted on our walls in orange. So it's not quite the in-off experience.
Orange being the company colour as opposed to any other.
Yeah, sorry, this isn't a hoodie. I should get one of those sorted. But I'm middle-aged and nearly 40. I have to wear Superdry. It's mandatory. So and if you hover your mouse on those, they flip over, and you'll actually get a description of what that value is and a bit more depth behind it. So that's where you can go find it. So digitalglue.agency, and then the about page.
Good, excellent. Let's leave it at that. Thanks very much for your time.
No worries.
Don't know how long it's been, but it's been a good long session, and we'll get some good stuff. So it should be useful for other business owners looking to put together their values, see that delivered to the bottom line, pull together a good team, keep them cohesive, and be delivering for their customers. So thanks for your time.
No worries. Thanks a lot, Rob.